problem with her knee.
Also expected to appear before the board this evening, not necessarily in this order. Jennifer Zenz, Assessing. Jeff Pohert, PEG Program Manager. Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager. Jennifer Deshays, Risk Management. Nick Mesovich, Chief Information Officer. Ashley Wilson, Benefits Manager. Peter Donovan, Payroll Manager. Nancy Trask, Human Resource Manager. Jessica Haig, Arlington Street Community Center Director. And Tim Cummings, Administrative Service Director.
Okay. First item on the agenda is public comment. I don't see anyone, so none. Communications,
There are none.
unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions,
There is none.
new business ordinances,
None.
tabled in committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to remove from the table R-23-125, which is the budget.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to remove R-23-125 from the table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This evening, we're going to be doing administrative services. Administrative service on Department 106, Department 110, Arlington Street Community Center, 111, Human Resources, 112, Payroll, 113, Benefits, 120, Telecommunications, 122, Information Technology, 128, Risk Management, 129, City Buildings, and 130, Purchasing, and 132, Assessing, and 134, GIS, and 2505, CTAB, PEG, Access Channels Fund. So, to start us off, Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you.
You can sit, because you're going to be here for a while.
Thank you. I was just going to ask if I may join you up here, and then as the various departments are called before you, maybe they could come to the podium
Yes.
here, and we could go from there. Great, thank you.
Yes, Alderwoman Karen.
It's Alderman Karen. Question, did we ever find out why the bottom line total for proposed budget is exactly the same as what the mayor has given out? Where last week we found out that one of the budgets was higher proposal than what the mayor did. You said you were going to try to get an answer
Mr.
for
Griffin,
that?
would you like to come up and explain? Actually, I talked to Mr. Griffin about it, but he was going to be here
Thank
this
you.
evening.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. Once again, I have the benefit of being here for 10 years plus. I watched with earnest the last week's meeting, especially Thursday, and wanted to kind of shed some light on how we conduct things here. And almost admit to a mistake that I made. So basically what we do is we start the budget process roughly 2.5 months before the mayor submits the budget. And what we try to do in that process is have an agreement amongst our colleagues that although the department budget might have been more than the department proposed along with the mayor proposed, it's just a lot of noise that's created because we have choices to make every day. And we try to communicate the best we can to those directors that, for whatever reason, did not get exactly what they requested. But I will tell you that we deliberate. Team this year was composed of the mayor, myself, Mr. Cummings, and Megan Karen, who was instrumental in creating the budget book. So if you recall, for several years, the department proposed equaled the mayor proposed, with a few notable exceptions. Last year, the year before, the mayor might have bottom line cut larger departments such as police, fire, and education. And the reason for that is we're trying to craft a budget that's reasonable and appropriate. But those departments, large in nature, sometimes disagree with the mayor So the mayor, what he does is he allows the department proposed to go in, and then he bottom line cuts it. This year, and I'll get into the citywide communications, but this year, the fire department put forth a budget, as the mayor indicated, he needed to make some reductions, and the debate will ensue. That was the only one, as you'll notice through the budget, that the department proposed doesn't equal the mayor proposed. Where the mistake I made was I should have included citywide communications, because Mr. Mansfield and his team essentially are public safety. And although the mayor and the team and I made the reductions, it wasn't an error, there's no problem with the software. I put it in as department proposed and mayor proposed. Had I had it to do over again, I would have put it department proposed and then cut it. So hopefully, I'm willing to answer any questions you have, but this is a process that I came to know in 2010 and so on. And if you go back in your budget books, the only cuts are the mayoral cuts, most notably on the bottom line. It's just, I mean, we all have come in with increases that we're interested in. I'll name a few. Welfare, couple of options there. We could basically cut that 384,000, take 150,000 of it to a adoption of the board, just reduce it and add it to revenue, and you have the same effect as paying some of those charges out of that fund. We decided, my recommendation was, let's see how it goes this year, let's see how it goes next year, and I'm very sensitive to the continuing funding of these things. This particular, as Mr. Mack indicated, that particular fund was created in 1998, 1999, because there was catastrophic funding requirements on that particular fund. That hasn't happened in a long time due to the efforts of Mr. Mack and his team. We watch it closely. It has 384,000 in it. Mr. Mack was very open during our budgetary discussions, and as he mentioned, he proposed increasing the welfare assistance. He also acknowledged he had 384,000 in the budget. We're just trying to tie things together. Would it be great if we had an infinite amount of money and we can just add, we can bring his appropriation up from 400 something to 540 and keep the 384, but we're trying to manage those things as effectively as possible. So hopefully I've explained what we're trying to do, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Follow up, Alderman Karen?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I haven't sat on the budget committee because I've worked with budgets for a long time. We always showed what we wanted as a department, knowing that the mayor and board of aldermen could make those cuts. So looking at this, it looks like everybody's in agreement. So I guess my question will be that to the division director or department head, what is lacking in your budget? You know, like the question was asked to Mr. Mansfield about that. I guess it was a position or some other funding. How much was your line item? And it was like $30,000 different than what the proposed. So we just have to remember that, because if we're going to deliberate later on whether we're just going to stand with the mayor's budget or make cuts or additions, we need to know that. So I guess that was the question I was trying to find out why. And I like the streamline. I think it's easier to read, but it's a little confusing because it's like, wow, we're all set and ready to go. So why are we here if everybody's happy with what the mayor proposed? So I appreciate your explanation, but my concern will be questioning each person, each division director or department head, what was cut out of your budget, and we need to know that as a budget committee to make those decisions down the road. But thank you so much, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, Shoshana Kelly has joined us on Zoom, so all votes from here on will be by roll call.
And have to ask her why she's on Zoom, and if she's alone.
Yes.
I can answer those questions.
Thank you.
I'm here, I can hear everyone. I attended via Zoom due to health concerns. And did I answer all your questions?
And you're alone.
I'm by myself.
All set?
What was that?
Okay. Director Cummings.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the committee. For the record, my name is Tim Cummings. I am the Administrative Services Director for the city. I'm here before you this evening to talk about the Administrative Services Division. While I have your attention, I want to note I also put together the economic development, hunt, and parking budgets. But as I understand it, those won't be discussed this evening. I'll be coming back before you on Thursday with our new economic development director, Jill Stansfield and Amy DeRoche, to have a conversation on those budgets at that time. I just wanted to set the table for you all this evening, and I hope you can appreciate the fact that that conversation will occur on Thursday evening. Relative to the administrative services budgets, I'm going to ask that you go easy on me. I am newer to this role. I am learning a lot about these budgets. So I'm going to make a commitment to you that if I don't have this answer for you this evening, I'll take notes. I will follow up with a written communication of some sort, because I'm going to assure you right now, I am not going to know every answer relative to these various budgets, but I would like to recognize the fact that we have department heads here with us this evening, and hopefully they may be able to pick up where I may fall short. And between the two of us, if we can't get you an answer this evening, we'll follow up with you.
So if there's a question that comes up this evening and we don't have an answer to, please give that answer to Donna so she can distribute it to the board. Thanks.
No problem. Happy to do that. Again, Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director. So last comment I want to make is relative to my overall approach to the budgeting. What I tried to do more often than not with this budget before you is to keep it level services from last year, only because I felt like I didn't really have enough time yet to make any concrete recommendations or do some true analysis to be able to come before you to make wholesale changes. I did, when I interviewed for the position, made it abundantly clear that from my perspective, I thought administrative services was underfunded to a degree, and that I thought we were lacking in resources in some areas. This is my observation, being from the outside looking in with my few years working for the city, and I wanted to come before you and offer some recommendations and some suggestions for you to consider, hopefully to enhance the Administrative Services Division. But those will be conversations that happen in future years. I did look at a couple departments this year and make some minor tweaks, and as we go along, I will get into that. I guess I could compare it to something along the likes of what we're doing with parking right now. As you all know, parking is something that we've been studying here in the city for quite a while. I have moved in a very deliberate fashion, much slower than maybe our parking manager would like. I take a very conservative approach, but I want to make sure we have all our answers before we jump. And we have done that type of due diligence. And I think, again, to use parking as an example, that will be a good conversation that we'll be having on Thursday night, and more specifically throughout fiscal year 24, because I do see some wholesale changes occurring in parking. I want to take that type of management approach to some of the departments here in administrative services, where I think this organization has run very lean and has done a lot with the resources that they have. But I have some concerns where there may be some liability issues or just some gaps in performance because of that lack of resources. And I feel it's my duty to just call your attention to it. Ultimately, you're the policymakers. You can decide how you want to spend the money. I can only make these recommendations to you or provide options. And that's essentially what I hope to do over the over the coming months. Finally, I just would like to remind you all that a lot of the administrative services budgets are very small in nature. And the rule of small numbers is percentages tend to look higher, because if you make minor increases in small budgets, it will show dramatically when you're trying to do things based off of a percentage analysis, something I always keep in the back of my mind. So a lot of times when I'm approaching this conversation, I look at it as more of a holistic approach where we're aiming to keep the entire city's budget at a certain level. As you know, the mayor has given instruction to try to have a 3% guideline. We submitted a mayor's budget of just over 4%, and that's well under the 7% inflation that we're seeing. So I think that this is a very disciplined budget and well thought out, and I'm pleased to be here before you this evening. Mr. Chairman, if I could jump right into administrative services.
Yes.
So relative to administrative services, again, very straightforward budget. Again, kept it pretty consistent to last year. A couple changes I do want to call your attention to. There was a consulting services line item that was escrowed. We are working diligently to move away from the escrow process. So some of what was prior year escrows are getting moved into the operational budget. So you're seeing a little bump in the contracted services, and these are for miscellaneous contracts that we have throughout the various departments, particularly within the HR department, and trying to maintain a happy and well-balanced workforce. There's another issue that I want to point out that is a little bit of a deviation from last year to this year, and that's reflective in vehicles repairs and maintenance, where we bumped that line item up a little bit. As you may or may not know, administrative services acts as the fleet manager, if you will, for general government. So a lot of vehicles that community development uses, or administrative services uses, or other departments that don't have access to municipal vehicles, we take surplus police vehicles and we rededicate them for the city's use. It's getting a little tough to maintain some of these older, tired vehicles, so we've bumped that up, and I would just note that this might be a conversation for us to have at a later date in terms of making sure we develop a strategy that everyone's comfortable with. We may be spending more on the maintenance of these vehicles than we are actually using, and we may want to reconsider how we handle this item. But for right now, this is how we've been handling it. And then the last item is, I've heard very loud and clear from various city employees that we have an amazing grant manager who writes our grants for us on the city side, but it's split 50-50. And so it was a request that we try to bring her entire salary in here on the city side, and so she could dedicate her services full-time to citywide projects where we would be soliciting grants. I think you've heard over the years how much grant money she's brought in to the city, so I think it's a value well worth investing in. I'll leave my comments there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just out of curiosity, weren't we splitting her with the school department?
50-50, yes.
So.
So the school department would, in theory, have to, pick up 50% part-time position if we were to move her over 100% over here on the city side.
Are they okay with that? Or?
That's my understanding, yes.
All right. Questions for administrative services? Alderman Jenny?
Yeah, just on that point, I didn't quite catch. So the grant writer, you want to move into 100% on the city side, and what will the school do? What did you say the school would do?
The schools are going to need to backfill that position.
Hire someone else.
At 0.5 or at a full 1.0 FTE. And I'm not exactly sure what their plan is, but that is what they would have to do. It's my understanding is that this is understood, and we obviously on the city side have recognized her value and the millions of dollars she's brought in over the last few years.
Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
I may get a question about whether this office is fully staffed. It is to date. Fully staffed, no vacancies. One addition to the staff, which was a prior year budget, was the record compliance administrator. That is something that we had in a prior year budget that we actually filled this year. And so we're at 100% complement. I think that a good strategic move for us to do moving forward in the future, and I'm kind of just telegraphing a thought that I have, is to separate that position out and actually create a different new department in future years for record compliance administration, where I have a feeling that as records administration continues to be a bigger part of local government, it may behoove us to separate this service out so you can track it more closely and see what resources may or may not need to be put towards it. Right now, we're housing it in the Administrative Services Office, but I think that that's going to be a conversation I'm going to be looking to have with you all over the coming fiscal year 24.
Additional questions? Alderman Karen?
Yes, thank you. Can you tell us what your proposed budget was? Or if there were any cuts?
So I'm going to answer your question that way if I could.
Certainly.
So again, Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director. There was no quote-unquote mayoral cuts to this budget. It was as presented.
Thank you.
Yes, Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not on this committee, but I have a few questions, just because I'm trying to, continue to learn about these different departments. So my first question is, I see on here in the budget, it says COO 2, so is that your title as well? We should be maybe referring to you as COO Cummings, or?
No, Administrative Services Director is fine, similar to, Treasurer Griffin or CFO Griffin.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Follow-up question?
So, I have two other questions, but you sparked one when you were talking about records. I'm just curious, when you say records, do you mean all records? So vital records, assessing records, every kind of record we have in here falls under this?
No, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
No, technically, the keeper of the records is the clerk. And so to be clear, the keeper of the records is and will continue to be the clerk. However, we have compliance issues with records retention and specifically 91A, the right to know law. And so this is a specific and dedicated service that not just Nashua, but a lot of municipalities offer to give people a centralized point of contact. A lot of municipalities have adopted this best practice that will help standardize and help respond to various record requests. And also, it's like a compliance mechanism where you have an internal person who's checking to make sure you're doing the other elements within RSA 91A. Minutes are posted, meeting notifications are done to try to be in compliance as best as possible. And so this is something larger agencies do. If you look at any larger public agency, they typically have this type of service. Municipalities are only now starting to provide this service, and it's definitely something larger municipalities are doing.
Great, thank you.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, so I was reading through this, and I saw that you're looking to do an assessment of 14 Court Street. I thought that when Director Kleiner was here, we had kind of done that, and I kind of wanted to know what your plan was for that, because you said to better manage the asset. It's definitely had some issues, so it's definitely going to cost some money.
Yep.
So do we need another assessment? I thought we had one that kind of told us what we needed to do there.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you again, Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director. So we actually really haven't pulled the trigger on that. We have set the money aside, and I would ask that you continue to keep that money aside. Needless to say, with the transition, that is one of the things that's on the to-do list that I haven't gotten to yet. But I do want to prioritize that. I do want to come back before you over the next year and talk about how we can better manage 14 Court Street. So that assessment hasn't been done yet. But while I have your attention on that fact, and it kind of goes hand in glove with the building maintenance budget that we'll be talking about in a little bit, I can tell you right now that I believe a future conversation needs to occur here in the city in terms of how we manage facilities. And we need to have a more strategic and comprehensive approach to our facilities management. 14 Court Street being a great example of that. The Hunt Building being another example of that. City Hall here, we are, more than $250 million organization. And we have wonderful assets. And one of the best things we can do is maintain the life of these assets as best as we can. That may mean we get a little bit more strategic and deliberative about maintaining these assets, and that may mean spending a little bit more money up front, understanding that it will pay dividends in the long run. But that's the type of management analysis that I want to come back before you on and say, I want to propose a new facilities department that would be for quote unquote general government. And we talk about how we best want to do that. What services should be provided in a centralized manner, and then what services still need to continue to be housed within the individual departments. We've just spent, just on hard construction costs, a little more than $11 million on building out a new DPW building. I think it would behoove us to have this very strategic conversation so you can manage that asset. And there may be some services that a centralized facilities office could offer that won't necessarily get the attention when a DPW is worried about clearing the roads and making sure that fields are being mowed. And that's their priority. And I completely recognize that, and that's the way it should be. But as this organization evolves, I think we need to keep that type of philosophy in the back of our mind.
Thank you. One last follow-up.
One last question.
So the last thing I got is, it says here you're also looking to improve morale and communication, so across city departments. So that concerns me first, because morale, you're improving it, so it must be low. But is there gonna be money spent to improve morale, and what kinds of things are you looking to do to better communication? Will it cost anything to do that stuff?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I could understand why maybe at first blush that looks a little odd, but when we know that, human capital is our biggest asset, and retention of labor is so critically important, because it's not just about hiring and getting someone through the door, but it's then the money we invest in bringing them along and training them. We want to get as much value as we can out of them. So creating an environment where people feel supported and feel appreciated, little things that we can do, I think will pay dividends. I think everyone recognizes that they work in the public sector. You have the lens of the public on you. But, one thing that we've started to do this year is through Human Resources Office in particular, is just bouncing around the various general government departments with some popcorn. Just popcorn and saying, how's it going? Are you aware of your benefits? We want to hear from you, and it's a slow Friday afternoon. This is something that we built into our strategic plan, and we want to know what you're thinking, and we want to then take that data and maybe develop some strategies to help improve morale and communication. I think morale has improved immensely over the last year, in particular, that I've been in the role that I've been in, and I've kind of seen it firsthand. But that's part of that contracted services line item that I mentioned earlier on in my opening comments that we wanted to set some money aside for.
I'm throwing a pizza party tomorrow, so I understand. Thank you, thank you.
Any
Thanks.
other question? Yes, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cummings, I understand and I appreciate your opening comments to go easy on you. And of course, I think, you're new to the role. However, as I was going through the budgets, I did go department by department. And I just want you to know that I took IT and I set it in a box over here, and because that's not fair to do, because in light of recent events. However, a lot of the other departments here are well over the 3% lift. And I understand what you said and heard what you said about that they're small numbers and that when you add a little bit to a small number, you can see a percentage jump. I understand that. However, you have a lot of departments under your purview, and those numbers can add up. And while it may, your total budget again, IT over here represents about 3% of the entire general fund by my math. But, so it does add up. And I will be curious to hear, as the directors come up, why the overage? What is driving that overage? Not saying that it is or it isn't. That's a discussion for another time. But, you know, for instance, when I see the first line item, administrative services, up 13%, you know, what is that driving it? You know, 71,000 more than previous year. So those are numbers that I look at in preparation for tonight to listen for various things. So when the time comes to vote on it, I can understand and I can explain to my constituents why this budget overall, while not in keeping with the mayor's guideline of 3%, is up more than that. So it's more of a comment than a question.
Director Cummings.
Yes, thank you. Point well taken, and I appreciate the comment. I tried to address some of the concerns you just raised now, and so to answer maybe just to the general comment, some of these costs are fixed costs. They're what we've have in either contractually obligated to or are part of our policies and procedures relative to the unaffiliated plan and people moving through the various grids and step. And then I've pointed out where I know we have increased it beyond that, such as the grant position. But for the most part, most of these budgets are fixed with fixed costs increasing more than inflation. And so we need to be cognizant of that. And a lot of that is salary and or the fixed costs that we have to operate. So the discretionary spending we try to cut back on as much as we possibly can.
Thanks.
But the point is definitely well taken. I completely agree.
Everybody else set? Alderman Jenny?
Thank you. So I really like what you said about maintaining the assets that we have, both physical and human assets. I really like hearing that. I think, I'm 100% behind you on that. But I did have a question, and maybe, maybe you already think you answered it, but on wages full-time, it's about $100,000 increase. I know you said that there's a half of a grant writer that's been added there.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the rest of it?
Just contractually obligated increases, nothing else.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All set. All right, we're gonna move along then to Arlington Street Community Center.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Tim Cummings, for the record, Director of Administrative Services. Relative to the Arlington Street Community Center, unfortunately, Jessica couldn't be with us this evening, but I'm here on her behalf. And this is a relatively straightforward budget. Again, this is a very small budget per se, but it is one where we tried to present it and keep it as consistent for a level services budget as much as possible. I think the bigger question at hand that you all need to be aware of is this Arlington Street Community Center grant opportunity that we're pursuing, which is a conversation we can have at another evening, or we can have now, but it's predominantly the big thing that's going to drive FY24 operations and mission. And although it doesn't necessarily affect this operating budget, it's going to be a critical priority of that group for FY24. So, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to go into that detail now, or would you wait? Would you like me to wait?
Let's see if we have any questions on the community center. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious what the capital improvement is for this year.
Yes, go ahead.
So that is the grant opportunity that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So,
and just one thing, you have that under capital improvements.
I
You're gonna address why it's not in the list of
I believe the strategy will be, and this is subject to confirmation, is it might be an escrow request that we put before you because it's capital. And of course, that's only if we get awarded the grant. So it's the local match necessary for a $1 million grant that that was submitted and currently being pursued, that is being offered through CDFA. And the Community Development Finance Authority here in the state of New Hampshire has, for the first time ever, offered a very unique grant for community centers. And so it is a grant that is tailor-made for us, and so that's why we wanted to seize on the opportunity to submit for it. I'm pleased to say that we were able to successfully submit. I believe there was about 80-ish applications submitted. If we are successful, we would get approximately $1 million that we could put towards the deferred capital maintenance of the building. And we would have to provide a local match, which that 125-ish represents. We won't hear about this grant for a few more weeks, or I should endeavor to say maybe even as early summer. So the thought process, I believe, is let's see if we get the grant. If we're successful in getting the grant, I would be looking to come back before you, probably during escrows, to have the local match in place. And then we would need to go through the contracting process.
Additional questions for the Community Development Center? Yes, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. And I understand Jessica isn't here tonight, but I'm wondering if you could ask her and then get back through Donna. I'm just looking into the services outline, the bulleted points that they have. And as I was reading it, I was craving just more detail. And really the question, for instance, assist community members in finding appropriate resources. So my question to that was, like what? And that's what I would love to hear, just a little bit more color, if you will, on what exactly Arlington Street, like specifics, just to better understand it. Thanks.
Okay.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, that's a great example of something I'll follow up with you on with a written communication, but I do know we keep track of numbers in terms of services that are provided. I can't recite them to you off the top of my head, but I do know that a lot of community meetings are held there where the Arlington Street Community Center acts as a facilitator or a conduit to try to provide local services to some disenfranchised populations in particular. There's also a preschool that gets run out of there where, I would say 10-ish preschoolers are serviced by the Arlington Street Community School. So your point is well taken. I will get some specific numbers and follow up with you so you have that detail.
Thanks.
All set? Yes.
So I'm going to ask.
Alderman Cameron?
Yes, I'm going to ask the question again. Is this proposed budget exactly what the mayor is providing?
Yes, to answer that question, this is as presented and also is at 100% complement, no vacancies.
So,
Alderman Karen?
so is that going to be true for all of the rest of your
No.
department? Oh, okay. Thank you. I will ask again. Thank
A
you.
deferred question. All right, next is humans, Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the $1 million grant for deferred maintenance, what kind of maintenance does it need that costs $1 million?
Thank you, if I may, Mr.
Director
Chairman.
Cummings?
I can, we had a construction management firm go out, Martini Northern, a very reputable construction management firm, go out and help us develop a cost estimate. We needed to submit that for the grant. And it talked about some of the various needs of the building. There's more than $1 million of need for the building. That's only what the grant can help us with. And you're looking at new windows, you're looking at new mechanicals, heating, air conditioning, You have electricity upgrades that are necessary. There's some weatherization, door frames and whatnot that needs to occur. But the biggest thing that needs to occur, and I don't want to be alarmist here because we had it checked out by our building safety officers and we're in good stead right now. But there is some deterioration in some of the exterior walls relative to the brick, and we're gonna need to get that stabilized. We don't want it to get worse and get to a point where it becomes structurally unsound. So we're gonna need to get some of that brickwork taken care of. A lot of this has to do with water, water infiltration that has occurred over the years. So that, all those costs, are just the need to do's and are not, anything of the wants that need to occur. That's a whole separate list.
Okay. All set, Alderman Jane? Follow up?
So when I was a child, there was a fire station there, and next to the fire station was a library annex. And I used to walk there and borrow books from it. So that building can't be that old. I mean,
I absolutely agree with you, Alderman Jettie. That building could not be that old. And I think that's a good point that you make relative to the annex. And I think how cool would it be if we could have kind of like a satellite library someday there again. Right now, we do not have an occupancy on that building. It will take some improvement to be able to gain an occupancy. But that's the type of vision that this grant could help us with. So I'm not saying this grant round, but if we can show to CDFA that, they continue with this grant, that could be a next grant request that we talk about where we look to maybe activate that satellite building and have it act as an annex.
Two things, the Community Development Center is next door to where the fire station is, or was. And when we started the Community Development Center, we put quite a bit of money into that building to get it so it could be occupied. So, all right, all set? Yes.
Well, it's just one comment. I had the honor to be the captain of that particular fire station. I've seen things go down the toilet and do not know where they went.
Oh, boy.
It was in pitiful shape. When it rained out, the rain came down the walls, and the city asked us to live there. It was pitiful. It was pitiful. The diesels were start up, and the bedrooms are right adjacent to the main apparatus floor. And so like all the walls were soot and everything from the diesels. It was unhealthy and very Spartan living. The only good thing about it was a darn good busy company that everybody wanted to get into. So, but the thing is, it does need a lot of work. And I agree. If it's got to stay, and sometime if you want, I'll take you down and show you where the tunnel is.
I have been to that tunnel.
All right.
And I've been through that tunnel, and it was quite a scary experience.
Thank God it's only short.
Okay, if it's all set, we'll move on to Human Resources.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, Human Resources, and with us this evening, we have Nancy Trask. If I fall short, I am going to look to Nancy to help save me. But I think this is, again, another relatively straightforward budget. No real changes here per se, except for we did roll in some monies that were escrowed in previous years. That, again, we're trying to get out of that habit of using escrows for operational costs. And so that obviously means we're going to need to move some of what we have escrowed into operating budgets. And so a lot of it reflects needs relative to strategic initiatives like professional development and training, helping with recruitment and attraction of employees. Something I set aside, something that was escrowed that I wanted to continue to set aside money for. And as I get my sea legs here, and I think it will help us immensely. Again, it goes hand in glove with morale and attracting employees, is doing a compensation and salary survey. I did my due diligence before this meeting, and I watched the prior budget committee meetings, and I heard a question arise as to whether maybe there was enough money set aside for a lawyer in the lawyer's office, it's been open for a really long time, and, the question at hand is, are we offering enough salary to attract, the personnel? This type of strategic tool will hopefully help us answer some of those questions that you are rightfully so asking. All I can tell you is, we are offering what the current pay structure tells us we should be offering, but we need to revisit that from time to time, and I think we're due for that. So, again, Mr. Chairman, relatively straightforward budget here, no major changes, and something that I think we accomplished our goal by rolling in some of the prior year escrows into this operating budget.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. I think this might be a question for CFO Griffin. But what I think I just heard you say is we took money from the escrows last year with the intent of adding in programs. And as the saying goes, once you give people something, you can't take it away. So you're shaking your head. But
Yeah,
what
I
I
want to clarify.
So I need help understanding how what we thought when we were approving those escrows, an overage to maybe pay for a one-off project or whatnot, is now adding money into the general fund for the following year. I think that's what I heard you say.
Oh, Director Cummings?
Yeah, just one clarifier to that, not programs, but projects. And so I would argue a good reasonable thing to use escrow money for are projects that are one-time in nature. And so like this, for instance, this compensation salary survey is a one-time project. And so, it was escrowed and we're moving it into the operational budget. Now, your point is well taken if, you don't want that year over year potential money to show up again in an operational budget. But to do that, then you need to have an escrowing process. It can't be both. And so, we're trying to follow the direction that we've heard relative to try to move some monies out of the escrowing process and more into the operational budget. And so that's why, it's presented to you the way it is.
Follow up, or you were all set?
Okay, let me ask it a different way, please.
Yes.
Last year, we allocated money from the escrow accounts, overage. You took that money and you paid for programs inside the HR department, salary surveys, et cetera, whatever that was. This year, you want to do it again, but you're not counting on escrows to bring that to you, correct?
Director Cummings?
Yeah, essentially that's correct. We're not going to do it in the escrows. We're going to do it through this operational budget.
Got it.
And I want to make sure I'm being attentive to the questions that are asked at hand. And I've heard time and time again, HR is at full complement, no open positions within the HR department at this time.
Thanks.
And reflects, the budget reflects what was requested by the department as presented by the mayor.
Thank
Other
you.
questions for Human Services? Human Resources, rather. I have one, the consulting services that last year were 13,000 and now we're 136.5 and we've only spent 25.13. Can you just explain what those consulting services are?
Yep, that was exactly the question that I think Alderman Sullivan was asking when we're rolling in.
So that's the study?
Yep, correct.
Okay, that answers that. Employment background checks? We have to do that every year?
We have to do that with almost every single hire, depending
Well,
on what they're
hire.
getting hired for, but yes, whether it's a driving record check or a criminal record check, depending on the position, it's taken very
So
seriously.
this is for new employees and this is covering new employees coming into the department?
Citywide, yep, correct.
Oh, city line, okay. All right. And the only other question I have is recruiting and retention initiatives was 0 and now it's 6,500. Is that the popcorn?
Oh, I am not spending $6,500 on popcorn. But to your point, Mr. Chairman, it is trying to make sure we're paying for advertisements in the right place, for postings, making sure we're participating in job fairs, making sure we are being more proactive than reactive. This, with the unemployment rate being the way it is and working in local government the way it is these days, it's hard. It's hard to get people, and at that, not just anyone, but people that will fit in at this organization. So we recognize that we're going to need to spend a little bit more money in this area moving
So
forward.
for that amount, for what you said you were going to do, that amount's probably low. So,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, but I think I would rather take a very conservative approach.
there you go. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go into payroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, payroll, Peter Donovan couldn't be here with us this evening, so I'm here in his stead. Happy to answer any questions that come up. It's relatively straightforward budget, trying to provide a level services budget. I will note that any increases that you see here are the contractual increases that we have. We did bump up the overtime a little bit because we've been seeing a trend where we're needing to spend a little bit more time getting payroll done. We do payroll weekly here in the city, and that's maybe a conversation to be had about an efficiency that we could look at moving forward. But as of right now, we run payroll weekly, and so getting that done in a short time frame, is making some of our folks having to work a little bit longer, particularly when we're trying to get the information systems that we have all talking to one another correctly. And so it's not a huge concern, but it's one that I just feel an obligation to make you aware of. Lastly, consulting services we bumped up, but again, that's reflective of something that has been escrowed, that, again, moving away from that process, we put it into the operational budget, but is a consulting service that is needed to ensure that we can get payroll done in time by making sure we have our information systems all talking to one another.
So,
We are 100% staffed, so we're at full complement. The budget as presented is what the mayor recommended.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Thank you. As someone who does payroll, I understand that, if you don't, there are time constraints, you gotta get it done. We switched to bi-weekly payroll a couple years ago. We've saved a lot of money on the processing end, and, it's well worth the discussion, I think.
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman?
Director Cummings?
So I don't want to say this too quickly. A thought I've had is an efficiency we could achieve that will pay dividends is by looking to do something like you just suggested, Madam President. But that will be a cultural shift for this organization. And you're going to have labor groups here who are going to be very concerned with even the idea of this being discussed. I'm not saying we should shy away from that conversation. It's one that I actually would welcome, and I have suggested a couple times internally, and I think this would be something that I would be looking to have a more serious, robust conversation with you all on in FY24. But I don't want to have that conversation in a lighthearted manner, because I can see the potential angst it may cause for folks. But I do see some efficiencies being achieved.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Yeah, I mean, in that respect, with the unions and everything, we did it with the healthcare. We did it, and it was painful. It was painful getting there, but we did it. So I look forward to the conversation.
I do too.
Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Alderman Wiltshire stole my thunder, but yeah, bi-weekly seems to be the standard out there, and you know, she was exactly right. The healthcare was a huge change. But if it can give you efficiencies that allow you to do other things that make, whether it's their lives better or the city's lives better, I think it's absolutely a conversation we need to have. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
That's exactly right. I think what we would be doing is creating some efficiencies where we would be stretching our resources further because we'll be creating capacity. Right now, they have to do so much in a certain finite amount of time that if we give them an extra week, it will help the process and the system so much more. So it's something that I've, from the outside, have looked at and said, I think that is something that we could address or look to have a conversation with you all on. When I came here to Nashua a few years ago, I was shocked that I got paid weekly. I said, who gets paid weekly anymore? But I am very sensitive to the fact that we have people who have been in their positions for 20 years. They've built their lifestyle around this. And so it's a conversation that we should have, but we need to be very deliberate about.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go into benefits.
Again, Tim Cummings, for the record, Director of Administrative Services. Benefits is very straightforward. It's being level funded from prior year. It's a fund that runs, as you know, we are self-funded benefits program. John Griffin is here this evening. I want to thank him for coming out and being here because he can speak to some of the more technical details on the benefits program that I can't necessarily talk about yet as I'm still getting up to speed. But essentially, it's a level services budget. No increases in staff, though I do want to note we had our benefits manager leave a couple weeks back now. We're in the process of interviewing. I believe we will have an offer letter out this week, hopefully, fingers crossed, and we'll be back at full complement in relatively short order. And this budget is being presented as requested by the mayor.
Any questions for benefits? Yes, Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. So forgive my ignorance, but when we talk about self-funded benefits, I thought we contracted that out to Anthem and people like that, don't we? I mean, we still need people internally
To administer, yes, the program, yes, but we have health insurance, which Anthem, is a provider of our health insurance, but the administration of that is all, internal. And I should say for the record, we rely heavily on some very expert health insurance consultants as well.
Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move into
Mr. Griffin?
telecommunication. Oh,
Mr. Griffin has a question.
what? Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. Tim did Director Cummings did a nice job explaining what we do, and we do a ton. These people in the benefits department just got through open enrollment, which for a city of our size is no small feat, especially when everybody's calling them. Secondly, the team that we have engaged since 2010 is Workforce Benefit Solutions, which helps guide us in not only the contract negotiations with entities such as Anthem, stop-loss providers to protect the downside, as well as helping us with all the federal and state regulatory things that need to be done. The current program is self-insured in the fact that we manage it and we farm out to Anthem not only the healthcare claims adjudication, but the prescription drug program. And since I've been here for 13 years, the prescription drug program has just gone off the charts with regard to price escalators, and you hear that nationally. we are able to negotiate with this team and with the team of Anthem significant prescription drug discounts. And you'll see them in that very small printout. We're going to try to do better with that. What's happened is, and we kind of projected that over the last few years we've come before you, is a significant increase in non-emergency things that are being done out there, to include a lot of knee replacements, hip replacements, shoulders, everything you can imagine. That was pent-up demand. As we remember, the hospitals could not provide those services during the pandemic because they were working on the other more pressing needs. But that has had the result of us providing or recommending to the mayor a 9% increase in healthcare costs for our employees. So we track it very carefully, but we've seen a systematic reduction in the balance in the fund. And as Alderman Karen pointed out, we did a great job getting most of our unions. They're pretty much all set with the high deductible HMO. And there's a frustration that, didn't we already accomplish everything with regard to healthcare? But the reality is, most of the larger providers are trending at 9, 10%. You're gonna see that every year. So Director Cummings, the mayor, and I will be watching this fund. And one of the things we may need escrow for is to replenish the fund, because we didn't want to do a complete Big Bang Theory and charge 20% increase just to get the fund up. So we manage that fund, and it's called the Benefit Self-Insurance Fund. That's the fund that the monies come in through premiums paid by our employers and the employer and the employee, and all the claims go out. So for example, we budgeted 41 million in claims this year, and it looks to be approaching 44 to 45 million, so we have to watch that carefully. So we're hopeful that the 9% increase will kind of steady the ship for this year, but it's one of those things we have to watch going forward, so thank you.
Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, it's been relayed to me that it's not unheard of that a lot of municipalities this year are seeing something in the order of 12 and 13% increases. So to Mr. Griffin's point, it's definitely something we're going to need to monitor. We're doing well right now at about 9-ish%, but you know, in the following years we may need to have a more sophisticated conversation about how we're handling our benefits.
Okay. Any other questions? Telecommunications, didn't we do that with Mr. Mansfield already? Or who's,
I don't believe so.
Which telecommunications are we looking at?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman. I believe what you're referring to is Department 121, if that's.
Yeah.
So, and this is something that I believe in the past Mr. Griffin has handled, and I can speak to it a little bit, but essentially that this is software and computer equipment, if you will, citywide or enterprise level systems are in this budget. And it's a little different this year than previous years, because the IT department for many years was housing the operational costs for citywide enterprise systems. And they were trying to do that as well as carry out their daily functions of providing services to the city. And anyone who has licensing agreements for software or whatnot, you know that those year-over-year increases go a lot larger than the standard 2 or 3% that our typical operating budget guidelines try to speak to. So similar to the way benefits is being managed, I believe that this is a more comprehensive and strategic approach to consolidating our software and computer needs into an isolated bucket, if you will. That is really a fixed cost that we have very little control over, similar to utilities, if you will, and get it out of the department's budget, because it was eroding their capacity to provide any other type of services, trying to balance all the needs. So I think that that's a fair summary as to where this is at, but I I would defer to Mr. Griffin if he wanted to add any additional comments.
So I'm just trying to point out that the agenda has telecommunications while the book has technology maintenance. So it's technology maintenance that you're addressing. Yes, Mr. Griffin?
John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. This was a change in the former telecommunications. Telecommunications was a relatively small budget in the $200,000 range. And during the budget deliberations, Mr. Mizovich suggested to Mr. Cummings and I that we carve out of his information technology budget certain maintenance contracts related to enterprise-wide software, and I think he would probably do a whole lot better job explaining it. In addition, what's in there is certain softwares that we use, ClearGov being one of them, that it's a good place, as Director Cummings says, to house these costs that are gonna go up. They're subscription-based, so they're gonna have a piece of increases that sometimes above and beyond what the mayor would guide. So Mr. Mizovich would be, the right person right now to explain his interest in creating this new grouping. And then between him and Mr. Cummings, Director Cummings, they can talk about the next budget, which is information technology. So I would suggest maybe Mr. Mizovich come up and explain a little bit more detail what's in this particular budget. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mizovich? You want to take a seat, because you got the next one, too. Hello. Alderman Sullivan's carved that out, so I don't know if that's.
I have a tendency to spread out, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nick Mizovich, Chief Information Officer for the city. As Director Griffin and Director Cummings mentioned, this technology maintenance is the former telecom, the 120 telecom. And we renamed it because it's going to be more encompassing than just telecommunications. So since it's, at the new fiscal year, now's the time to make some of these changes. And as was previously mentioned, the biggest change is moving the software maintenance out of IT's department budget into this bucket of money, if you will. And the reason for that is primarily we are obligated to 7% increase on our contracts for software maintenance. So as a department, IT struggled with meeting that mandate to the sacrifice of it's eating away at, plans to purchase hardware or plans to purchase this for, throughout the city. So, and again, it's, it's not software used by IT, it's software used by all employees of the city. Whether it's here on the municipal side, the ERP program used by everyone, school district, PD, etc. So that's the reason why we're making this proposal of relocating that line item and some other line items accordingly for the same reason.
Okay. All right, questions for what are we calling it? Just forgot the name myself. Technology maintenance, questions?
I think Alderman Sullivan has one. I want to say before he asks, though, there's no salary associated with this line item, so there's no staffing that needs to be at full complement.
I appreciate that. I thought I saw salary on this. No, you're right. Okay. So if I heard you correctly, I do this a lot, what you said and what I hear. So I just want to make sure that we're in cahoots on that. You took this budget, formerly telecommunications, you broke it out of IT because for whatever reason, if the budget dwindles, then software expenses suffer. And software is beholden to year-over-year increases because that's the way the contracts are written. I might just offer, maybe, I think purchasing is here as well, but maybe I negotiate software contracts, and if you go longer, then they can cut into the year-over-year increase. Just gonna put that out there. Anyway, I think that if you, so that's why you did it. At the risk of losing overall monies for software because of year-over-year cuts or erosion of budgets.
Correct. More for hardware expenditures, actually, than software. Because when the software maintenance exceeds the budgeted amount,
Then that eats into your
then
hardware
that
budget.
eats into our hardware budget.
I understand. All right. Got
Not,
it.
not a good budget to be eating into lately.
That's true.
Yes, Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the only issue I had with this is, I'm trying to look at it to see if there was increases or not, and because it's written the way it's written, like, for instance, photocopier lease, no budget before, 50,000 now. I have to go look at another page to go, there's the photocopier lease from last year. Okay, it's the same. All right, then we look at the next line. And so I wish there was a way to have shown like what it was, because when you look at it, it goes 1.8 to 135,000, and it's like, oh my God, but yet you could probably find those
Yes.
in the other lines from before. So I just wish the book was in a way where you could see like, how much is this truly over what it was last year, and how much more are you asking this year, or that's the only thing, the comment I wanted to make on that.
Okay. Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. To Alderman Tebow's point, what can we look at last year to compare and contrast? Do we take the telecom budget and add it to the IT budget? Or what can we do apples to apples comparison of?
Okay, all right. Let me take a look here.
If I may?
Yes,
Mr.
Director
Chairman,
Cummings?
I think this would be a good example of maybe a written communication where what we could do is pull out the 3 to 4 line items that were in the IT department's budget and now have basically shifted to this new budget. And it will show you that rough numbers, those combined line items were somewhere around 950, almost $1 million. And now due to contractual increases, we're probably around like 1.3. And that's being shown in this separate budget as opposed to being housed in the information technology budget. So I think we can get that for you, and that would maybe make it a little bit more clear and transparent.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it took me a while to figure out the shifts.
Yeah, if I may, to Director Cummings' point, just for purposes of tonight's discussion, the copier maintenance contracts, photocopier lease, let's see, those two are exactly how they were, the same amount, identical last year, to last year's budget when they were in IT. No increases for those,
And they're not in IT this year.
correct.
That's where I had to find the zeros to match to the,
Yeah, the biggest increase was software maintenance. I believe last year was 1.1 million, more or less. Now it's 1.3 for the following year. And again, we'll follow up with more detail. And then there's also increase, as you see under other services, we had previously telephone voice and telephone cellular. I requested additional categories to break this up for better tracking purposes, because, not everything is telephone voice. So that's why you're seeing, numbers new this year and no numbers last year.
all set, any questions?
Just one more, please.
Yes, Director Sullivan?
Thank you. So for telephone cellular, we'll see in other departments will come up and they'll talk about, cell phone services for their
Correct,
people in their department.
correct.
How is that different from this, which is,
This line item for us,
15,000.
in this one, it's for the devices that are predominantly in the fire vehicles.
Okay.
Not assigned to a person.
okay,
That's the distinction.
All set?
Yep.
All right. We'll go right into IT.
And before we roll into IT, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure it's clear
Director Cummings.
that this department was presented as requested by the mayor.
So who's gonna give the overview? Nick?
Sure, I'll give the overview, unless you want to, Director Cummings.
No, feel free. It's pretty straightforward from last year.
Yes, not too many increases, mostly salary. But there's, one particular item was hardware maintenance that was increased. And that's due to, additional equipment being purchased and, now we have to maintain it. But the other line items are pretty much held to what they were for FY '22, or FY '23.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman?
Director Cummings.
There's going to be a big personnel change that I want everyone to be aware of. With regret, I accepted Dan McMullen's retirement papers this week, and he'll be leaving us at the end of May. So in FY '24, we're going to have to look at, a new structure for the IT department. I just want everyone to be aware of that.
Yes, Director Sullivan? Alderman Sullivan?
It's all right.
Steve Trevor.
Well, I thought you were going to say something, so I didn't want to step on you.
I was just going to say that I was gonna ask whether the new, IT security person's gonna end up in this, or is he gonna be somewhere else in the, Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So some of what I'm about to say hasn't been fully vetted out and is subject to change, but there's two prevailing thoughts right now, and we're not exactly sure which direction we're going to ultimately go, but the first one would be a separate department, and that department would fall directly in line with the office of the mayor, similar to the director of emergency management or the legal office or the economic development office reports directly to the mayor. This would be a new office of cybersecurity that would be citywide, that would be, instituting policies and protocol, training and support for securing our information infrastructure, again, across all of our governmental apparatuses, police, fire, library, general government, schools, so on and so forth. We need some time to study this. We want to make sure we're doing this appropriately. As mentioned previously, the IT teams of the various city entities are going to get together, talk through some of these issues. Ultimately, I'd like to put together, a document that will make some official recommendations, particularly a budget, as well as some ordinance changes that would be necessary to be able to execute appropriately on this new mission. That's if we proceed in this direction. Alternatively, we should study whether we should provide this service through a contract. And that might be a contracted service that we could have all these deliverables sketched out and have a third party execute for us. And that is a conversation at hand that I think the IT teams need to kind of weigh out the pros and cons of. And that's why the money was specifically set aside in contingency for FY '24, so we can come back and report to you on how best we think it might make sense to implement this service. But without question, we are going to need to implement some sort of service.
Okay. Any other questions on IT? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, thank you. So looking at the page 246, which lists the positions, I count there are 13 positions in your department.
Director Cummings, can you comment on the technical spec too?
Yes, I could. I think this is all going to subject to change now with the recent notice of a retirement. So there could be some changing, but as of right now, yes, it's being presented. I hadn't gotten into my full IT overview yet. So if you want me to do my IT overview, I can talk about some of these salary changes.
Okay, I was just surprised because I've been there. I haven't seen that many people there whenever I've gone there, but they may be hiding in different offices and.
So,
There's a back office that
Yeah.
you don't go
That I
back
don't get
into.
to see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Director Cummings, do you want to give an overview?
yes, if I could. So right now, we're at 100% complement. And I do see that changing before FY '24. We're going to need to backfill for at least one manager's position, but that's also going to lead us to a conversation of whether we need to restructure or not. And, you know, I think I'm going to be coming back before you and making some recommendations on that front. So this, I want to just say with the caveat that this salary line item is in flux. But I did want to make sure I pointed out that we set aside an additional IT support specialist position, which is an increase this year due to the amount of time. We know that some of the tech support has been helping out with public safety, particularly the fire department. And so I had added in one additional tech support position. But obviously now with the recent changes we may need to reevaluate that.
So is it safe to say that at some point between now and the final budget wrap-up, you may be back before us to clarify the IT area?
Yes, that's fair to say. The only other comments I want to make on this front is there were no other substantive changes, all pretty straightforward from previous year. I addressed the staffing. It is being presented to you as requested by the mayor with no additional cuts.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. So, to that point, you have one person retiring. So according to this, there are 13 people in this department. One is retiring.
Yeah.
You just mentioned you're going to add somebody else in. So is that a net head count of 1? So 14. Is that number reflected in this budget?
Director Cummings?
Yes, that's correct.
Under salaries and wages?
Yes, correct. And so I just want to be clear on that. But that one salary represents half of what the current salary is for the retiree. So I could envision us potentially saving some money, but potentially adding heads. So there would be-
Saving money on that one position, but overall, your salaries and wages might be higher because you have to add a head.
might be down because the salary may be, we may not have an obligation to pay the current salary for the manager at the dollar amount that is. It could get reduced, but we would be adding potentially another position. So your salary item would be potentially reduced, but we might get additional capacity because of the retirement.
So the salary for the new position, though, is going to be coming out of that not escrow, contingency. So yes, it will increase the salary level going down. It's not in here yet. And we have to wait till
But
they
you
make a
just said it
decision
was.
whether they're gonna hire them or not.
You just said it was.
Yeah,
But you just said it wasn't.
well, I mean, that salary, that new position that we were talking about, that's gonna be under the mayor, is not in here.
No, I'm sorry, but he mentioned that he was going to add an IT support specialist to this department, but also needed to replace the manager that was leaving. So it's a net gain on the head count of 1. This
Okay.
is different. This is set apart than the CISO
Yeah, I think-
position.
Director Cummings, are you talking about the IT person for the fire department?
it would be a net gain of one head, but the salary may not change because the manager level position most likely will get reduced.
So what you're saying is you might be able to hire 2 people for the price of 1.
That's
There you
correct. That's correct. And so that, I just want to point that out to you, that is the new dynamic that we have as of today, and that just developed recently as of yesterday, when I received notice of the pending retirement. But prior to that, it would have been an additional 1 FTE above and beyond prior year budget. So it wouldn't be a level services budget. You would actually see a little bit of an increase. And I just want to make folks aware of that potential, reality that could have occurred.
All set.
One final question.
Final question?
So the $1,084,144 that you have requested for the 13 heads, you believe will cover 14 heads in fiscal year '24?
If I may.
Yes,
Mr.
Director Cummings?
Don't hold me to it. I want to come back to you, but yes, that is the prevailing theory.
Okay.
Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, what was the title of the position of the person who's retiring?
Sure. Let me, IT manager. IT manager infrastructure, I believe, is the
That is correct.
title.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go into risk management.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, Tim Cummings for the record, and Jen DeShays is here with us this evening. This is a pretty straightforward budget, but there are changes in this budget from previous year's budget, and I want to make sure folks are aware of some of these changes. First and foremost, no real salary changes. It's pretty straightforward with the contractual obligations, no additional positions. We are at 100% complement. We are fully staffed. There's a couple areas where I am recommending we spend some more money than last year. And I want to make sure folks are aware of these additions. First and foremost is spending for cleaning up areas where the unhoused may be dwelling on public property or on right-of-way. We have recently been requested to clean areas, sanitize areas. We need a third-party contractor to do that in a sanitary manner to ensure we are doing it appropriately and safely. So there's additional funds for that new service that we have to provide. We've gotten a lot of comments and observations over the last couple of years, and more so over the last year, about this need. We've tried to do the best that we can to handle it in-house, but there's some safety concerns about having our employees do it, and so therefore we've set some money aside this year. Additionally, we are setting some money aside up front, but hopefully we will get this money back, and it's relative to property management services that we're going to need for the various tax delinquent properties that we will be taking back under the guidance and leadership of Mr. Griffin. We know we're undertaking a big tax delinquency effort to reclaim properties and get them back on the tax rolls. Undertaking this strategy is going to have a cost to us, but all these costs we should be able to get back when we sell the property and return them to the tax rolls, but we're going to have a little bit of an upfront cost that we need to budget for. And so that's in the risk department as well. and something that I want to make you aware of, because it is an enhanced service from a prior year's budget. Lastly, there was a request for legal services in this budget that I want to say the mayor has suggested that we don't fund right now. So that is a difference than the department request. But I think very strategic in doing so, because we want to have a little bit more time to watch that line item and make sure we know how that's trending. We know we're going to need more money for it, but that's, again, what I'm hoping to be a one-time blip, and we're not going to necessarily need to put it into an operational budget year over year. So handling it later on through the escrow process is the current strategy. The request, I think right now, is conservatively going to be another $500,000. That's going to be necessary, but didn't want to put that unnecessarily into this operational budget when we thought we could address it later on during the escrow process.
Questions? Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Other expenses, I'm seeing that both line items, one, loss prevention, we had hit at 80,000 last year that we were putting in the budget. We were negative for that. So we're putting 175,000 this year. So why the difference there? And then safety training has gone up by 40,000. What's that line? So those two, what are the differences? Why are those so much different than in past budgets and past accurate for this year?
Great question. So that 175 is the homeless, the unhoused issue that I spoke of in my opening comments. We need to spend a little bit more on training. And I think that this is, again, it goes back to making sure we're doing what we can for our employees, making sure that we're aware of the laws, we're being compliant with the laws. This is all relative to various harassment trainings, sexual harassment or otherwise. And so we are going to introduce a program where that's more of a concerted effort, and we're going to be focusing on our larger departments. And so this is citywide, where it get housed here, but it will be for our larger departments throughout the city. And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, there's also one other line item, and it's relatively minor, but something I want to make you aware of is we recently have been notified that we need to remove some shrubbery and trees in the right-of-way. It's not necessarily contemplated in the DPW budget, but because of sight distance issues and with risk of it potentially being a liability for the city, we did put some additional money aside this year, different from previous year, for this initiative as well. And so again, relatively minor additional cost, but wanted to put that out there so folks know that is something we've been hearing about, and we're doing the best that we can to address.
Yes, there are trees that in different places in the city, and especially on Tinker Road, that are in the city right away, that are dead. And if they fall, DPW has to pick them up. If they fall in a car or kill somebody, you want to address that?
Well,
No.
well, Mr. Chairman, you're speaking very much to the issue at hand, and, we're trying to get ahead of it a little bit, so I appreciate the comment.
This is, part of that's in my ward, I appreciate it a lot more. Questions, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. The line item that caught my eye was the workman's compensation claims from 2 million to 2.38 million. Wondering if you could talk through that a little bit, please.
I think this is a great time to hand it over to Jennifer Deshays, the risk manager who came out this evening.
Good evening, Jennifer Deshays, risk manager. Bear with me 1 second. So the workers' compensation claims line item has increased, or we're increasing it, $300,000. due to what's called permanent impairment ratings. We thought we would see them go down this year after COVID, but they're based upon payroll. And due to the overtime that we had during COVID, that is it's still playing into the claims when it comes to temporary total disability, temporary partial disability, and permanent impairment ratings. So that is what that is for. Does that
If I
answer?
may.
Follow-up question, Alderman?
So just to, so I could explain this to, like my kids. These are people that, for one reason or another, are disabled, they can't work, and through guidelines set forth either in our own control or policies that we make, we need to continue to pay them through workman's comp, even though they are not returning to the city payroll. Is that?
Not necessarily. These can be people that are returning to the city payroll, or these could be people that are not. And they're governed by state statute. So any of these payments are approved by the Department of Labor prior to paying. And what we do is we set reserves on these cases. So these are actual case reserves that we're seeing into the future that we're aware are going to hit the budget for this upcoming budget.
Okay. All right.
Alderman Jettie?
So on that issue, I see there's a line item for, I can't read the number, it's too small for me, but
Yeah, me
it's
too.
workers' compensation policies. So that makes me think that we have workers' compensation insurance.
We do.
Okay.
So we are self-insured per claim for $1 million. That workers' comp insurance is for anything above and beyond the $1 million
Okay.
per claim, for the life of a claim.
And so the under $1 million claims, we pay ourselves,
Yes, we absorb that into the budget.
and that's the number that Alderman Sullivan was asking you about.
Correct.
Right? And could I?
Follow-up?
Please. And the legal services that Director Cummings talked about, that he estimates conservatively at $500,000, is that outside legal services? What's that for?
So those are, what you're seeing we also budget within the claims arena for your workers' comp attorneys when they're assigned to workers' comp claims, property claims. That's what you're seeing in the budget.
And that's that 500,000 that he was talking about?
No, do you want to speak to that too?
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Director Cummings.
Yeah, so Alderman Jettie, I think your question at hand is what is driving that outside legal services cost at $500,000? We've seen an increase in litigation to the city from various parties here. Some of them known to you, others maybe not so much. But that is driving outside counsel that we have to retain to be able to defend the city.
Okay.
If I may, just to further elaborate, it's my understanding that last year we set aside something like $300,000 for this initiative. I think to date, we're about 50% through that.
Correct.
And so, and we haven't even started some of the more intensive legal work that would need to occur. So that's why we're asking for some additional time to kind of evaluate how much we're going to need. And that's why it may make more sense to do it through the escrow process. And again, I'm really hoping that this is more of a one-time type thing and not something that we're going to need to have year over year appear in this operational budget. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. That's probably a conversation for a later date.
All set? Follow-up?
And one more. When Attorney Bolton was here, He was asked about court-ordered, there was a case where the court ordered us to pay legal fees of the other party. And he said that that came out of your budget.
Yes.
Correct, and
So-
that is out of that line that Director
So-
Cummings just mentioned.
Which line is that?
That is out of that 300 we put aside for the legal fees, that line item, that's where that would have came out of.
Okay. And where is that on here?
I don't believe it would necessarily be delineated to that level of detail. It's rolled up, I believe, in the legal services.
Correct.
I don't know what number you have in front of you, but I believe it's 53128.
And if I could, you know, I think CFO Griffin, you've done a great job with this new book, but the type could be larger.
Duly noted.
Yes. You had to supply magnifying pages. Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. And if I may, I would have, because I forgot my readers tonight, if you look at it on your iPad, you can, the electronic copy that they sent us, it's dynamite. My question is, so when you say $500,000 being conservative, when I hear conservative, I hear you're overshooting that. That maybe it won't be that much, but you're just being conservative and you're gonna say, I'm gonna ask for more and hopefully get it. This might be a question for CFO Griffin in forecasting our escrows. My concern is that's a big chunk of money. That's a big chunk of money that we're not asking for in this appropriation that we may or may not need. I mean, your confidence level on escrows, I mean, that's my thing is, if you're forecasting what your overage is gonna be by the end of the year, should we be putting some of that in here? So we're not hogtied if escrows don't go by forecast. I don't know if I'm asking my question right, but
Director Cummings?
Yeah, I'm following along. I think I'm not yet confident in the number. So I don't want to put it in this document that's before you when I think we need a little bit more time. And I know that there's going to be an opportunity to revisit this question sometime sometime in the fall timeframe. And I think, again, and I think this is a good point. This is not programmatic. This is going to be more like quote unquote project based in the fact that I'm really hoping that there's an end to this. And so that's why handling it through the escrow process, I think, is well intended. And I hope that the number is much less than 500,000, but I would rather come in with that number right now and have it come under that than to come back before you during a year and ask for a transfer because we didn't have enough. The other issue at hand is we only get to, unless we tap into our reserves or contingency, most of us folks who work in local government, not even necessarily here in this city hall, is we recognize that we really only have an opportunity to fund various requests and services once, maybe twice a year. So some of what we're doing is we're trying to plan out and think how long we can stretch that 300,000 or potentially 500,000 to see, because we don't want to ever ask for too much. And then you sometimes get ridiculed when you have to come back and ask for more. I'm not saying that happens here in this city, but I've seen it in other municipalities. So that's why we're always very sensitive to this issue, and that's why we want to have confidence in the number when we do ask for it.
okay. All right, thank you.
Alderman T-Bone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So how many suits do we have currently against us that we have to deal with?
Can I clarify that, Mr. Chairman?
Director Cummings?
Yeah, so there's suits and that's handled through the legal department where there's some lawsuits handled through our legal department. And then there's some lawsuits that are handled through outside counsel which is then through the risk department. So if you're asking for an aggregate figure, again, that's something that I would have to come back to you.
Well, I'm asking for like the 500,000 that you're thinking about asking for. How many suits is that going towards? Like, what would that be going
All
towards?
in, everything.
For the 500?
Yeah, for all your litigation needs right now. Do you know off the top of your head?
No, I do not, because not, when we hire attorneys, it isn't just to defend something that's a lawsuit. It could be for the Department of Labor, it's a hearing,
Right.
a mediation, advice. It could be any of those things, so it's hard to quantify that number when it comes to lawsuits. It could just be claim driven on a lot of it.
It's,
But 500K is a large number, but lawyers are expensive.
Yeah.
but, and to be clear, I think, to add some, some clarity to this, it's more, I think, and this is what, Manager DeShays is trying to suggest, it's more than maybe what you're just thinking about in terms of lawsuits. It's because we have a lot of claims as well that we need to defend against. But I can follow up with a written communication on the dollar, on the amount.
Alderman Tebow?
So I get what you're saying. I mean, obviously, sometimes it's an employee claim, and it's not what, you know what I'm thinking about. But I guess my question is this, I mean, 500,000, like they said, everybody's been saying, it's a lot. So is this, if you look back, the last 10 years, is this way above anything we've seen before? Or is this relative to year, it's gonna be about this?
No, we're trending very high.
Very high,
Okay,
very high.
thank you.
And to the chairman's point, lawyers are not cheap. Being married to one, I appreciate it.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Oh, boy.
Any other questions? Seeing none, okay, we'll move on to city buildings.
Again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Mr. Chairman, this is a very straightforward budget. Really no changes from the previous year. It's being presented to you with just the general obligatory fixed cost increases, either due to equipment or utility or salary or benefit or whatever the case may be, that a lot of it is non-discretionary. I would like to take an opportunity to point out that this would be a budget that, if this is a conversation that folks want to have, would be the precursor to a more robust and deliberative conversation about facilities management and how we may, at some point in a future budget, look at changing this building maintenance budget to be more of a facilities department. And I'm getting a little off topic here this evening, and I apologize, but I did want to take the opportunity to kind of raise the question to see what the appetite of this group may be. But nonetheless, relative to this operating budget, it is a level services budget and pretty straightforward.
Questions?
You know what my question is?
And if I could, to answer the questions at hand, this budget's being presented to you by the department with no cuts by the mayor. It's at full complement and is staffed appropriately with no changes.
Alderman Karen?
Thank you. How many employees do you have within this department? Oh, caught you.
I believe off the top of my head, something like 6-ish, give or take.
Okay,
5.63.
Yeah,
I
there we go.
didn't see it. And one
Alderman
more.
Karen?
I just want to say that in relation to this department and the staff, especially Jay, they are very accommodating and quick-witted. When we talk about maintaining our facilities, we've had some major issues, as you know, at the senior center with the roofing and water leaking and things like that. They have been very responsive in getting that done, and I know working with risk because the fire department was really concerned about the leaking roofs and tiles falling through. So I just want you to know that they really do a service to the city in maintaining our facilities. Thank you.
Greg Cummings?
And to that point, they are stretched very thin. I mean, I can't believe what they do. The amount of, I'm gonna come back before you and I'm gonna give you an astronomical number of like the amount of square feet that they need to maintain with, you know, less than 6 full-time employees. It's unbelievable. And then there's some assets that some folks may not even realize that we have an obligation to maintain. Like, most people don't realize the senior center is a lease agreement. And, you know, we have some obligations on our end with that piece of real estate. And so, and that's great. I mean, that's all well and good, but I think sometimes it gets lost because how good they are, you know, and how responsive they are, that they are, and they're doing the best that they can, that I think, you know, it's easy to kind of overlook maybe some of the needs that are there. And we do have some needs. There's some deferred capital maintenance with our buildings that would make a lot of operational sense if we were to spend the money to change. Case in point, there's some energy efficiencies that we could achieve by changing out our water faucets to be automatic turn-off. So we have some people, we are a public building, that leave the water faucets running. And that drives our utility costs up. If we could, you know, look to manage these items strategically a little bit differently, it would be better for the environment. It would be better for our organization in the overall. So anyway, I'll leave my comments there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, I've been involved with the budget for 14 years, and this area is always lean. And you're right, there are areas where we could spend a little now and save a lot later, but we don't spend what we need and we pay a lot later. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 2 quick questions. So how many buildings do we have, and what's an MEP?
Sure.
Stupid question. but-
No, great question. No stupid question. MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, typically those are your major building systems, your air conditioning, your heating, your ventilation, air circulation, all falls into your MEP. Sometimes you see it also slash with an FP, which is your fire protection. But again, they're your major building systems. How many buildings we have? Great question, because it really depends on how you want to look at it. Police maintain their own buildings.
I think it's 10.
Yeah, I
But-
see it now, thank you.
But general government, about 10-ish buildings.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get Alderman Tebow on the joint special, so he'll understand all of these terms. Any other questions on city buildings? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on to purchasing.
Excellent, purchasing. And we have Amy Gerard here with us, who will keep me on the straight and narrow if I get any of these details wrong. There is some minor changes here, Mr. Chairman, that I want to make sure you're well aware of, and I present them to you for your consideration. So this budget has an additional position in it that I am recommending that you consider. It's for a contract administrator position. There is a lot of contracts that run through the city of Nashua that there's a lot of hands that touch, but no one person really takes ownership of when it comes to some client compliance mechanisms that we really need to have in place. And so I'm going to describe our current process as clunky. And I think by putting an additional person in purchasing to help with the contract administration, it would help us immensely. I'll give an example. A department within admin services had a contract up before the finance committee, and that contract was approved, but then there was, it wasn't fully executed, and then it didn't make its way through the process in a timely manner. And we were able to get things done, so we didn't necessarily incur any damage. But what became very apparent through this process is we didn't necessarily have someone to help shepherd it through to ensure we got it over the finish line, including making sure that the records were filed correctly. As you know, we try to post all of our contracts, and I'm going to use the word try, on our website. And so I believe that this is a good increase in services, so not a level services from prior year. It's one that I'm recommending to you for consideration. I'm doing it with an eye toward making sure we are being compliant. I see a deficit or a gap right now in our current process. I will note that we do have a contract administrator in DPW, and we have one person as a contract administrator for one division, but we don't have necessarily a contract administrator for any of the other divisions. And so that has left us to need to rely on business managers, the department head itself, various admins, to ensure that the paperwork gets done. We do the best that we can, and as I've been just observing things over the last year or so, I think this would be a good investment that will pay off dividends for us. Another change in this budget that again makes it different from last year is I've asked that we look at taking on procurement software that we don't necessarily need to have the vendor, the bidders or the proposers pay a fee to participate in. We want to encourage all our proposals to come in electronically. I'm concerned, and I've raised this concern over a few years, that we might not be covering the market as well as we could, getting as many proposals as we should, because some folks are choosing not to participate in our process because they don't want to pay the upfront fee to be able to submit a proposal. They have to pay that upfront fee because the city of Nashua doesn't pay for that service, that software. So it's relatively short money, in my opinion, about $25,000 extra that would allow us then to be truly electronic, receive our proposals electronically, and know that we have a comfort level in having some groups participate that otherwise may not. I can tell you, I have gotten direct feedback from folks when I've reached out to them, asked them why they haven't submitted, and they have been very honest to say, well, we didn't want to pay the $25 upfront fee. We didn't know if we would really get the business from the city, so we opted not to submit anything. So I think this is something that we should look at entertaining, because it will pay off for us in the long run. The last change is a suggestion that we bring in some third-party consulting services. Not necessarily sure we're going to need all of this money per se. It's about $10,000, but it's to help with some third-party expertise when it comes to procuring energy. Fuel in particular. We right now lock in rates for our leaded and unleaded for the year, or whatever the case may be with the contract. In conversations with our purchasing manager, it would be good to have some third-party counsel and advice relative to the market to ensure that we are being good stewards of the public funds, and we lock in for the appropriate amount of time or at the appropriate rate. So that's some additional consulting services that I'm requesting that otherwise wasn't in the budget from previous years. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave my comments there, except for to say we are fully staffed. There's no vacancies in the current budget, and it's being presented as requested by the mayor.
Just one clarification point. All school buildings, and maybe all buildings, construction, are all reviewed by legal, all contracts.
Yes, all contracts are reviewed by legal.
Yeah, but I mean, these big ones are definitely. Questions? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you. So when you talked about leaded fuel, that caught my attention. Do we still use leaded fuel?
Diesel? I'm sorry, did I say leaded? I meant diesel.
Okay,
All set?
yes.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. You mentioned the contract administrator position is one that exists inside of DPW already. You did bring up an example about bringing a contract through finance and maybe some deadlines were missed. I would love to see as a form of a follow-up, either the job description of the contract administrator from DPW, along with maybe as a narrative that because of this position, we were able to save money, something to help add value, justify cost.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Being done, we'll move on to assessing.
Again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. We have Jennifer Zins with us here this evening. I want to talk to you a little bit about assessing tonight because it is a change, and it's somewhat of a dramatic change from what you've seen in previous years. And it really comes down to how we are going to, as a community, manage our assessing department moving forward. And so I'm recommending to you 3 specific initiatives that we should undertake. And first and foremost, I heard a lot of commentary about how much the assessments increased when we did our most recent reval, and some people suggested it was like in the order of a magnitude of 40-ish%, their assessment went up. And that's because you had these peaks where we had long periods of time from when we did our revals and going from one revaluation to another revaluation. And so what I'm used to and what a lot of larger communities do is they try to smooth that line so you don't get these big jumps of your assessment increasing by 40-ish%, but you do your revals more regularly. And so if you're in a market where your assessments are increasing, you're at least doing the revals in a very methodical way, so you're not seeing that 40-ish% jump, but you may see, if you do your revals 4 times, 10% each time. So it's a little bit smoother of a capture of that additional assessing dollars, and it doesn't hit the taxpayer all at once. And so what we have discussed with Vision, that is our current consultant who did the most recent revaluation, they did a full measure and list, is actually agreeing to essentially a 6-year contract where they would do a reval 3 times over the 6 years, and we would pay for this reval annually. So it would be every 2 years we would get a new reval, but we would build it into our budget in a way where we would be paying, and the numbers that we've discussed with them is $430,000. So how we would do this is, for the next 6 years, we would build into our operating budget about $215,000. And so the reason why we would do this is because we would want to take on a new statistical revaluation starting in January of '24, which would be fiscal year '24. We would start paying for it in FY '24. and then we would finish paying for that reval, that full $430,000, with a second payment in FY '25, which would still be calendar year '24, for those of you who are following along. This is, for me, not a very radical change. This is actually how I've seen it done in most of the communities I've worked in, and in speaking to Vision and DRA, and Jennifer's here as well. It's how a lot of our larger New Hampshire municipalities are moving to, and they're actually doing it this way. Portsmouth, Bedford are two communities off the top of my head that are handling it this way. So it's something that I wanted to offer to you tonight. We have been working very hard on this over the last 6 months or so to try to get to a place where we could do this. And so that is one of the major changes that I'm suggesting we take on starting in FY '24. The other two elements is software, moving away from our current what is called CAMA, quote-unquote CAMA system, to Vision software. Again, a lot of the larger municipalities are using this software. The way I'm suggesting we pay for this is actually we have enough money in the current FY 23 budget if we were to execute this contract prior to the closing of this fiscal year. And so we would be able to spend that monies. It's a little over $100,000, 150-ish, between 100 and 150-ish thousand dollars, but then there would be annual maintenance fees that would go along with this service, and that's about a $50-ish thousand that we would be obligating ourselves, which you would see be in addition to, and again, it would be a change from last year's budget to this year's budget. And then finally, looking to contract our chief assessing services. So it's been very hard to find assessors, period. It's been even more challenging to find a chief assessor. And so what I am suggesting we do is we work with a third party, in this case Vision, because they are the most intimate, has the most intimate knowledge of our market and of our assessing processes, and it will save us money in the long run. Where we would take that, basically we have about $100,000 in chief assessing salary, and we would really just not spend more money, but we would spend that money in a contracted service. And that's, again, reflected in the FY '24 budget. We've had conversations with Vision to help us with this. They would be looking at a multi-year contract, so we would have to be agreeing to this for multiple years. We're talking about 3 years, and then after that period, I think we could reassess, no pun intended, and maybe look to bring that position back in-house. But it's a service that we are required to have through our state regulators, and we are going to need to do something. There's quite a dearth in the market, especially with all the attention that's occurred around assessing in general here in Nashua. It's my recommendation to you that this is how we proceed. So those are the major changes between this year and last year, or what I'm proposing for FY '24 and last year. The budget as presented is the department's request with no cuts by the mayor. And I'll conclude by saying we do have one vacancy in this department, and it's one that the plan would be, if everyone sees through in the vision, again, no pun intended on what I'm talking about this evening, we would move we have a vacancy in our assessor 2, if you will. We have an assessor 1. What I would recommend we do is we move the assessor 1 to an assessor 2. We have some administrative support that have grown professionally, and I am a big believer in trying to promote from within. So we would move that administrative assistant person into an entry-level assessing position, or assessing 1, and then we would backfill that administrative 2 position. I say that to you all to bring it full circle that even though we don't currently have an assessing 2 position currently filled, it is absolutely necessary so we can continue providing the services expected of us in that office.
Any questions for assessing, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. You said you don't have a chief assessor, because there is not one listed under the, so you already took it out. Or is that chief assessor listed somewhere else and I'm not seeing it?
No, I can't speak for why it's not showing. I don't know how the budget prints. I can tell you that that salary, that $100-ish thousand is currently in an FY '23. And I guess to answer your question, what I believe you're talking about is that $100-ish thousand got moved down to contracted services, if that's where it got placed.
Oh. So you would normally have 8, you have 7 listed, but you actually have 6.
It's 247, he's referencing.
If I can, again, Alderman Sullivan, say that again to me?
Because the chief assessor is not listed in the head count under assessing,
Yep.
you should actually have 8 people in that department. You don't have a chief assessor, so that's
Under
7, and then you have 1 vacant that's listed, so really you have 6.
That, under FY '23 scenario, correct. FY '24, we would take that chief assessor, move it into a, third-party consulting services.
Okay,
So it would be out of the salary line item at that point.
okay.
Alderman Jettie?
Thank you. So the people listed as assessor 1, 2, and 3, those are the people that actually go out and look at properties and measure them and come back and figure out what the value should be. Is that correct? I don't want to interfere with, the salaries you've got listed there seem low, but I don't really know what, are you able to get the work done? I know that you have to make decisions about abatements by some period of time that's fast approaching. Where do things stand there?
Director Cummings?
Yeah, you're teasing me to say we should be adding personnel to this department in a sense that, of course, we could use more resources. We are, to answer your question specifically, we are getting it done with the resources that we have. We have a good system in place. I will say that even though we went through a reval, our abatements are not higher than what was anticipated to come in. They came in right on, what people thought we would get. So we're able to handle it. I think that's the first point I want to make. Relative to your other point and my secondary comment, our salaries are low. I think that's part of the reason why it is difficult to find talent and be able to get them here to work for us. These are all contractually obligated positions through a union, so that would take a protracted effort to try to change that. So it's what we have right now, and so that's why I'm working within the means that we have.
Okay.
All set.
And could I follow another question? So what about the Board of Assessors? They're not listed here. Are they not paid? Are they completely volunteer?
Director Cummings?
Yes and no. I actually found out recently that I do believe they receive some sort of compensation or stipend.
There's
I'm
a
not.
line, there's a line item on here for public officials' salary.
So, and I do believe they received something of that effect. I would have to get back to you on the details. If Alderman Dowd says that there is a line item on here and his intimate knowledge of this budget, I defer to him.
To the top. Wages
Of appointed officials, under 51, $5,000.
I see it now, thank you.
But I was surprised to learn that they do receive compensation, which was something that I learned.
They certainly deserve it. And could I
Yes,
follow up?
follow up.
So another thing, you know, I'm really not qualified to assess this information, but I have to tell you that I have received a lot of complaints about vision. And when you talk about what sounds like a wholesale move towards vision and buying their software and hiring them, I'm sure that you're making that decision, with better information than I have. But I got to tell you that people have complained to me about the way they were treated by Vision, and have gone to the little conference where they offered, after people got their number, to go back and talk about it. And people have told me, not just one, but several people have told me how they made their case, and the person they talked to said, yeah, that was a mistake. We'll make sure that gets corrected. And when they got their final number, it was exactly the same. And when they complained to the city said, the city meaning somebody in the assessing department,
Sure.
said, we had nothing to do with it, that's Vision. And so I don't know how accurate that information is, but I just thought I'd take the opportunity to give you that feedback.
I appreciate the feedback, thank you.
I have Alderwoman Kelly waiting.
Thank you. Coming on the heels of Alderman Jettie is interesting, but I wanted to just express my support of doing reevaluations more often. I know it was something that came up last time we discussed this, and I think having that incremental look will help us to keep people from having very large increases.
All right. Thank you. Alderman Sullivan?
A related question to assessing, but where do we pay our abatements out of?
If I may,
Director
Mr. Chairman,
Cummings?
there's a separate account, it's an abatement overlay that's
right.
separate from this, that handles
Okay.
those issues. Something I would like to offer as well, by doing these reevals more regularly, we're always talking about it going up. However, if the market was to change, we would also capture, when the market decreases as well. So I would want everyone to realize the converse could actually happen too. Although because we're New England and we are particularly part of the Boston metro, economy, I can speak, being a former economic development director, that we have a very strong market, so that tends not to happen. But it is something that you should all be cognizant of as well.
That's it?
Yes.
I have two questions. Why are subscriptions gone up so high, and what furniture are we looking at?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just, some of our furniture is tired and old, and we need to improve upon that. So that's why we put some money in to replace some of the furniture and fixtures that you would find in assessing, and then to run a credentialed, well-run professional organization, we want to make sure our staff has the appropriate certifications and credentialing. And so that means that we have to have some memberships and subscriptions and have folks take the required classes and whatnot. And we're pretty close to getting a member of our staff fully certified to be a chief assessor. And, you know, I laid out to you a vision that would be what I would hope to be a short-term solution. And then once we could actually have a chief assessor maybe come up through again, I'm always about trying to promote from within internally. You know, I think that would be the best case for all of us. And so that's why you're seeing some of those line items go up as well.
Any other questions for assessing? All right, seeing none, we will move on to GIS. GIS was pretty
So again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Pretty straightforward budget, Mr. Chairman, no real changes per se here. There was an escrow that we rolled into this operating budget that had to do with our consulting services. I'm sorry, our software maintenance services, I believe. That was handled through an escrow that we wanted to capture. And then going to Alderman Karen's question, this was reduced. The department request was reduced because what we decided to do was forego one of our prior year escrows and do without, because it was unnecessary. We were able to manage it within our current operating budget. And so there was a slight tweak there on that. So it's not a 100% reflective of the department's request, but nonetheless one that we can absolutely live with. It is 100% staffed with no open positions, and all the driving forces here are really fixed cost between wages and other contractual obligations.
Questions on GIS? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, so, I see. I was looking at pictometry fees. How do you pronounce that?
Pictometry?
Pictometry. So that's revenue. I thought that was appropriations, and I was wondering why it was so low, but. So
All
the
set?
pictometry fees, what is that?
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, Alderman Jettie. Yeah, that's I mean, unless Mr. Griffin knows off the top of his head, I'm gonna want to check and get back to you on that specific item.
You could just send that through Donna, please.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move into CTAB, PEG Access Channels Fund.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. Again, relatively straightforward budget, though I do want to call your attention to two items, and some of this predates me, so I don't have all the details, but as you may be aware, we made a change with the administration of our local cable access service provider, contracted service, from one group to another group. That happened, and that had an increase in cost because you know, when we put that out for an RFP, the contract on that increased. That's reflective in this budget. But part of that also is you know, it's not necessarily an increase in headcount, because as I understand it, all these staffers were currently in place, but there was an understanding that one staffer was going to transition from the contract provider to local government access and provide some support for our education and government and local access as well. So their salary is now getting accounted for in this PEG budget, that it wasn't in FY '23 per se. But it's not an increase in headcount, it's just a moving around of the dollars as I understand it. And again, this was all part of the change from one contract service provider to another. The other item that should be noted is, and it's not reflective in this budget, but there is, as I understand it, a conversation that is ongoing and one that needs to continue about potentially changing the split in franchise fees. As I understand it, about 4% gets collected. A little less than 2% goes to funding this budget. It was discussed that maybe it getting split to more of a 2-2 split at some point in the future. And so, again, that's something for you all to be aware of as something that may come about at the end of the day. That really affects your revenues into your general fund. But it's nothing that is contemplated in this FY24 budget, but that is something that is an open conversation as I understand it. Otherwise, Mr. Chairman, it's a level services budget with all other staff being accounted for. There's no vacancies, and the request is as presented by the department and the mayor.
Any questions in this area? Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. I know that for most part of tonight, we were talking about appropriations. I wanted to talk about revenue because there was a jump in the cable franchise fee. Did you just speak to that about the 2-2 split?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what that is reflected. Follow-up, if I may.
Sure.
We've added, at least in Ward 9, I'm sure it's uniform across the city, we've added other internet service providers. Will that have any impact on any of this? I mean, since really the economic model is changing. And where are the opportunities to take advantage of that?
If I may,
Director
Mr.
Cummings?
Chairman, so this is getting a little bit beyond my expertise and what I'm about to tell you.
Director Cummings, I am here. This is Jeff.
Oh, Jeff Bonar's here. So-
Okay, sorry, I'm up here monitoring the system, so that's why I'm on Zoom. Oh, sorry.
So I'm just going to conclude by handing it over to Jeff.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, a lot of it is federally driven law. So this federal statute that would need to change.
That's it.
That would actually help us in that regard, because as Alderman Sullivan points out, the business model is completely changing, and it's something we need to be aware of.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Everything that the Cable Act is based on, of course, was 1982. There was some rewrite to it in 96, but even 96, the internet was an infant. So it's not included, and anything on the internet, that whatever revenue that is not included. It's only cable television. And our problem, in a way, coming up in the future is those revenues are going to go down. So basically, there really does have to be a rewrite of the Cable Act, but of course that's federal, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So that's why we wouldn't really get any benefit out of revenue from internet companies, because it's not part of the right, not part of the coverage of the Cable Act.
All set? Or any
I will write
question?
to my congressperson.
I have.
I give you their address. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Any other questions on this area? No? Okay, then. Alderman O'Brien, do you have a motion?
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
No.
Oh, yeah, I am very tempted with that one.
Yeah.
Forgot my place. Re-amend the motion to table R-23-125.
Motion on the floor is to table the budget, R 23-125. And this will have to
By
be
roll
by roll
call.
call.
Roll call.
Call the roll.
Yep. Alderman Sullivan,
Yes?
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Karen.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
Alderman at-large Wilshire,
Yes.
Alderman at-large O'Brien votes yes, and Alderman Richard Dowd.
Yes. Okay.
Motion
stays.
carries.
All right, public comment, is there anyone in the public wants to, there's nobody here from the public? So none, general discussion.
If I may.
I just want to relay that the school department has now set their graduation dates on the night we were going to have the public hearing on the budget. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, their graduation nights, I just want to double check this real quick. Is it June 12th and 13th with rain dates of the 14th and the 15th. So Donna is trying to figure out when we can have that public hearing on the budget. The 19th is a holiday. So stand by to stand by. We'll let you know as soon as we have a date for the public hearing on the budget, but those are the nights you'll have off unless you have a graduate.
Perfect. If I could.
Yes. Alderman T-Bone.
Yeah, for general discussion, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say thank you to all the departments. I know you guys work all day and, you know, now you're here till 9:30, so I appreciate it. I'm not on this committee, and I could have had plans to go somewhere else, but it's important to me to be here and care about, you know, everybody that puts this budget together, and to learn about it and to make sure I know, so I can go back to my constituents, what you guys all do. So I truly appreciate that. On a quick side note, there was an election tonight, Ward 4. Mark Plumundon for state rep, he won 151 to 60. So he'll be our new state rep in Ward 4, so congratulations to Mark.
All right. Sounds good.
Alderman Sullivan.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. And then, I didn't really know of an appropriate time to bring this up, so I will at the end of the meeting under general discussion, but it is budget related. I had emailed the committee last night about something that was brought up earlier about the COO position that was tagged on to the administrative services position. And again, when I'm saying this is nothing personal. I look at it's a box and there's numbers next to it. But when I went through the budget, and I'm looking at you, but none of this is personal. I noticed the salary lift from the position that the economic development director to the administrative services / COO position of about an 11% lift. And I looked at where that was in relation to the person who held that job just a year ago, which was 18% higher than previous. And then I looked at the person that we backfilled that position with compared to the salary that was left. And there were just salary discrepancies. And as I look at the budget and I look at how departments are constructed and whatnot, those are things that I look at. You mentioned headcount and whatnot. I go to that immediately. That's where I go. I want to know if it's fully funded. I want to know if we have all seats filled. And I want to know what people are getting paid. And I draw lines and I go back and forth. And if anything that I'm saying is incorrect, then please tell me where I'm wrong. Either follow up via email or whatever. But I want to make sure that I have this right, because this is open to the public. And I think if people dig deep, they're going to ask questions. And I just want to make sure that we're covering everything.
Can I speak to that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And I
Director
apologize, because I know that this is definitely not the norm for me to be speaking during your general comments, but I think the clarifications would behoove everyone. And I know that this has caused a little chatter out there because I've been party to some right-to-know requests over this. So I want to just get some facts out on the table. I can't speak to the analysis that was done by the prior speaker. So I don't know the numbers that are being discussed per se, but there's some very clear things that I want to get out there on the record. First, last year to this year, there are COLA increases that would need to be factored into that. You know, the unaffiliateds, if you're on the STEP plan and also getting your COLA, it's about an 8%-ish increase. 4% for a STEP, about 4% for the COLA, and that's just needs to be factored in. So doing a look back between previous years might not be the most accurate representation. No question, the current economic development director who was brought in at a lower salary than the one I received. But I also held the position for quite a few years longer. And when I first started out, I started out at just around $100,000. And I can tell you that our current economic development director is making more than that. I did not get a pay raise when I took the administrative services job. I moved over to the appropriate step on the grid when I transferred grade. The administrative services director was classified as a higher grade than the director of economic development. It was not on the same grade, but otherwise it was, relatively the same rate of pay. And I did that, and I did it with the understanding of the mayor that I was not going to get paid, although potentially allowed through our policies and procedures, an additional enhanced pay, because I was doing 2 jobs for longer than 6 months. And I said, no, I am not going to take extra money because I could be entitled to get some sort of stipend for being the director of economic development as well as the administrative services director. But what I did say to the mayor when I took the position was, I think it would behoove us, and this isn't necessarily for Tim Cummings' benefit, but the benefit of the organization, to classify the administrative services director as the chief operating officer, the COO, in a very similar fashion as you have with the CFO, as the mayor is the CEO. And why do we want to do that? Well, I think, one, it makes it more accurate because it puts the administrative services title at the same level as the CFO. And right now you have a treasurer / tax collector / CFO, and it's the same grade. And so that's just to make it, consistent. 2, I personally, this is where it does benefit Tim Cummings, I don't think the average person knows what a quote-unquote administrative services director does out there in the world. And so it mattered to me to actually have it be a little bit more translatable to the outside world of what an administrative services director does in terms of, making sure the operations of the organizations runs well. Finally, and this is the most important part, when a municipality gets to a certain size, and Nashua is getting to that tipping point, it's not uncommon for senior management's titles to change to chief. And you're seeing it now with a movement towards, the chief public health officer. You're seeing it now with a chief financial officer. You're seeing it now with a chief operations officer. You have a fire chief. You have a chief of staff. You have a police chief. You have chiefs when your organization and your municipality is of a certain size, because you have a layer of middle management that will inevitably come about where you're going to have directors. And so you want to create that space. Smaller municipalities don't necessarily need to have that, and I think there was a time when that worked for Nashua, but I see you on a cusp of transitioning to needing to have that additional space as this organization grows and changes. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I think those clarifications would be helpful for the record.
Just one additional thing, just for informational purposes only, not taking a side on either. But you also have a degree in what you're doing now, whereas the former person didn't.
That's very true.
I bring it up only because There was no, I don't recall any discussion, any voting, anything that happened. I'm simply going through the budget book and I see COO next to your title, which I've never seen before. And I emailed it out and I know that we voted when we combined the positions of tax collector and CFO, and I don't recall discussion, vote, anything around this board around elevating that position. And to all due respect, my concern is that when you do that and then you say, you know, you have directors, then we're adding in layers of management and administration. And that is where bloat can happen. And that's why I get concerned when there is no check and balance on that. That's why I bring it up.
So I think to be fair, since he works for the mayor, I think the questions you have should be directed to the mayor.
That's very fair,
It hasn't come
absolutely.
here.
Yep.
Alderman T-Bone?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you for that explanation. I think the biggest problem I have, because we have to answer constituents' questions, is I heard it through a constituent, you know, and so I'm like, I don't know, I don't think he's called that. He keeps calling himself administrative assistant, administrative director, so.
I answer to hate you as well, so.
So I'm like, I have no clue, I'm gonna have to check into it, and then I open the book and there you are, and so I mean, if I thought your explanation was perfect, and maybe it was the mayor, or maybe I don't know. I just think a better communication on it, so then we can battle the rumors, and you don't have to do the right to knows, and again, it might be more the mayor than you, but you know, that's the only problem I had with it. I don't have the problem with the changing of the title as much as I do with having to answer rumors, and that's the problem, so.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
point well taken, and I would be happy to, I think you're absolutely right, I'd be happy to submit a communication for the record, because I think that was a miss on my part, so I do apologize.
Any other things for aldermanic comments? Alderman O'Brien, now your famous motion.
Okay. Motion, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn, it'll have
And
to be by roll call.
Yes. Alderman Sullivan,
Yes.
Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Karen,
Yes.
Alderwoman at Large, Shoshana Kelly.
Thank you for my full name, yes.
Okay. Alderman Wilshire.
Yes.
Alderman at Large, Michael O'Brien, yes, and Richard Dowd, our chairman.
Yes,
You have a quorum.
we're adjourned at 9:41. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.